Go ahead.
So in class we were reading a book called Dear Martin by Nick Stone. A 17-year-old boy named Justice is arrested based on assumption by a cop named Officer Castillo. He was trying to take his drunk friend home so she wouldn't have to drive. A cop comes over to him and assumes he was trying to hurt the girl since he was wearing a black hoodie and was African American. He is handcuffed for several hours. This causes Justice to see the world differently. He starts writing letters to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Here in the letters he explains what happens to him and his feelings about the racial injustice happening in the world. Justice is motivated to make a difference for once and for all.
Okay, so we have a few different. Everyone has one question.
Okay.
For 4 categories. So the first category is questions about the book. So the summary you just heard. So the first question is, in the book Dear Martin by Nick Stone, Justice tries to take a nonviolent approach by studying Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Then the media and the news cops are frequently shown using violence. What do you think about the accuracy of this portrayal?
Well, I think history has proven itself. We know that there's been racial injustices in America, and it started many years before I was born. Everybody always says they're striving for better relationships with police and the communities and minorities, but now, especially with the social media out there and telephones and video cameras and stuff, it's an accurate portrayal of those particular incidents, but it's not an accurate portrayal nationwide, because there's a lot of good police officers that wouldn't do that. But those 1 or 2 that have those incidents, all of a sudden it paints a bad picture for all law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So this is a very real problem that we continue to face in society. I think it's awesome that you guys are studying this, because it does take a number of people to make changes.
Okay, next question.
In our book, the cop was racially profiling Justice, a black teen, by assuming he was up to no good. Do you think that we have evolved from that assuming today?
I think as a general question, I would hope that we're making strides forward to get beyond that, but I believe it's very prevalent in today's society, even to this day. We know that certain races are minorities, yet they seem to be the ones that are dominating the populations, higher percentages populations in corrections, so in prisons. So I'd say that it's still prevalent, but it all depends on when and where it is. I think that a lot of times these calls and things like that can get misconstrued, where you actually have a complainant where somebody calls in and says, there's a suspicious individual. I've never seen him in my neighborhood before. He's walking down the street slowly. He appears to be looking in cars. Even though he hasn't done anything, our job as police officers, once we receive those complaints, we have to approach those individuals and we try to identify them and see, are they from the neighborhood? Should they be in this neighborhood? And things like that. Now, unfortunately, for some people, they don't accept those explanations that there was a complaint on them, and then they do want to, really push forward saying, I was stopped because I was black, or there's been a lot of racial profiling that is required by the Department of Justice with all police and law enforcement today. So if I stop a vehicle on a traffic stop, or I stop a pedestrian, I now have to provide a stop card to them, identifying who I am and the reason for the stop. That is a new law that's come into play. Not only that, but when we write citations, we have to do what's called racial profiling. So we have to identify the person, we have to identify them at their age, their race, or their ethnicity, and we have to date and time of location of the stop, and they try to compile all that data to see what is the percentages that this police department is stopping African American, Hispanics, or whether it's Anglo-Saxon, whether it's a white or Caucasian person, So the bottom line is there have been new strides forward to try to stop some of those injustices by kind of policing the police departments. And that was all started back in like 1999, I believe. It was when Bill Clinton was president and Janet Reno was an attorney general. And they came up with a team of people to try to determine how can we stop some of these social injustices, by police stopping somebody, racial profiling. And when I'm talking about racial profiling, let's say, for example, they're talking more in the lines of what they're wanting to know is, if a police officer stops somebody, why is he stopping this person? Is he stopping them solely because of their ethnicity, or solely because of the color of their skin? And so we have to compile data, and we send a report in every month for racial profiling. So, and I'm not the only department that does it. Everybody does it nationwide, and they have those requirements were put in place for some years now. It was originally going to start off as a 5-year thing, and then it's just been contracted and continued on because they do want to view this and make sure that we are doing our jobs when we're doing that there is no racial profile. I'm not stopping somebody driving down Cleveland or Route 136 because I see a junky car and it's an African American male. There has to be a probable cause why you're stopping that vehicle, whether it's a white person, a black person, but that's why we're required to do that. So it could show if there's particular officers on your department that are targeting these individuals. Now, where numbers can be skewed is because anybody who does any statistics and percentages and things like that, they can be skewed at some times, because let's say, for example, our racial profiling for somebody who's African American or Hispanic for stopping people in Hayworth would be very low, because there isn't hardly anybody that lives here that are of other races and things like that. However, if you worked in the south side of Chicago in a predominantly African American neighborhood, their numbers are going to be really high because that's a majority of the people living there. You understand that? So sometimes the data isn't always factual, but I do believe it's a good thing that we do that. I think it's the Department of Justice keeping police departments in check.
In the book we were reading in class, Jesus is getting arrested for something he didn't do. The cop says he sees it as a black man. What are your opinions on that?
Like I said, I think that, as I stated earlier, I think that unfortunately that probably does happen, and not by a majority of officers. Police departments across the nation, and in Illinois, we're proud to be a part of. It's called the Mobile Training Unit. We pay an annual fee, and we can send our officers to classes, and I really stress that we do that. But some of the classes that we look at is dealing with minorities. There's a class going on right now that I was wanting to go today, but I had to teach this class. But it was dealing with community relations with minorities. It was dealing with some of the causes and stuff for the formation of Black Lives Matter, things like that. It would have been an interesting class. But, I think that our officers, it's important that we get trained in cultural diversity. Say, for example, that you guys are so used to dealing with people who live here in Hayworth. But if you have somebody that moves here from Chicago or say that they're from another country, they're from, South Korea, or they're from China or something like that, they do have cultural differences. And a lot of times when I'm trying to deal with certain people, and say they refuse to cooperate in some sort of an investigation and they don't want to be witnesses, some of that could be cultural related. You know, a lot of Indians, for example, and there's a lot of American Indians, they have their own police, they have their own reservations, and a lot of people don't like to cooperate with regular law enforcement authorities because they only deal with their security, their police. So I can't take that as a sign of disrespect that they're lying to me or they don't want to cooperate. A lot of times it is cultural. Some people, they deal with it in their families and, you know, whether it's even for gangs and stuff. When you look at that to go to another extreme, you'll have a lot of gang members and their families who refuse to cooperate, even if they were witnesses to a homicide, because the fear that they have of retaliation from these individuals. So a lot of police in those places, they understand that. So it's very important that all law enforcement officers nationwide, that we understand that there is a cultural diversity, to identify those characteristics and to be professional and deal with each situation as it comes.
Okay, Allison, you wanna read the next one?
As the main character of our book, Justice, tries to explain his reasoning for being out late with his intoxicated ex-girlfriend. Officer Castillo tells him to shut up, don't make it worse, and you're up to no good if you're in this nice neighborhood. In addition to these messages, he uses a lot of swear words toward Justice. How should a police officer approach this situation? Is there any policy on how police speak to people, and how are officers trained to react in situations like this?
Yeah, and once again, as I said, you know, we have had officers trained in cultural diversity. I have explained, for example, in the Hayworth Police Department, we've had trainings, and I've told people, I said, if you stop somebody and you're dealing with somebody, I expect you to treat them how you would want your daughter, your mother, your brother, your sister treated. I want them to remain professional at all times. There are guidelines for officers. We have policies in place that, you know, if you're cursing at somebody, that's unprofessional conduct and becoming an officer, and that could result in disciplinary action. Some of the things that you see that are changing that paradigm of what's going on is that we have a lot of police departments nationwide going to the body-worn cameras, that they're required to have those on. We do not have those, but what we do have is on traffic stops, we have digital cameras in the cars. They have microphones on their lapel. You know, they'll put it on their belt or up here. Some have microphones that come up to here. And the bottom line is, as soon as they hit those red lights, that starts recording. And their entire stop, the entire conversations, those are all being recorded. Now, let's say something bad happens. They can't just take a video out and get rid of it and say, I don't know what happened to the video. Our video cameras right now are so high tech that they record, and when they pull up to the police department, it automatically downloads through Wi-Fi directly to the server in my office, and they don't have access. They can view it, but you can't delete it. You can't stop it from downloading, no matter what they do. So I consistently will go through and look at traffic stops. A lot of times when there's arrests and things and interviews, I'm watching those interviews and I'm making sure that my guys are being professional. They're treating them with respect. And but it's a real tough job when you've got somebody who's cursing at you, and you're trying to maintain your professionalism when they're saying some really bad things to you. Yet that's our job. You're supposed to have tough skin. We have to expect that in our careers, that not everybody's going to like us, you know. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we deal with people, it's in a negative light. Somebody's getting a traffic ticket. Somebody's getting stopped by the police. Somebody's going to jail. So that's why you're seeing so much being done in communities and going around and talking to people like me being here. It's a part of community policing, you know. A lot of you may have seen me before, but may have never spoke to me. So you're like, I don't know, is he smart? Is he dumb? Is he a power-hungry guy? Is he, you know, and so being part of the community, getting out and talking to people, that's where you develop that trust. You know that they're professional, and when you ask them to do something and investigate something, you know it's going to be done right.
Okay, In the book Dear Martin by Nick Stone,